I don't think it is a controversial statement to say that Sir Peter Jackson is New Zealand's most famous filmmaker, best known by most people as the man behind the Lord of the Rings adaptations, regarded by many as the greatest trilogy of all time. Now it's time for a controversial statement, not by me, because I have never enjoyed the Lord of the Rings films. They are the walking simulators of cinema. Sure, I can appreciate the film craft, direction and stunning use of special effects, but as actual entertainment I'd want to spend 683 minutes of my life watching. They just aren't for me. As a result, when I think of great Peter Jackson films, I think of his early career and his horror comedy splatter films, and the best of those is this week's review. It's 1992's Dead Alive, or Braindead, as it is known in New Zealand. That's to be one of the most irreverent, out there, anything goes, gross out, twisted movies ever committed to celluloid. And frankly, I love it and think it's his most entertaining film. And here's why. Let's start, as always, with a very brief summary of the plot. The plot revolves around a middle-aged man who lives with his overprotective mother and his blossoming romance with Paquita, the checkout girl at the local Foursquare. Only one problem: while spying on him and his date, Mommy Dearest is bitten by a Sumatran rat monkey illegally smuggled into Wellington Zoo, resulting in her becoming a brain-dead zombie. Lionel tries to keep his mother sedated in the basement, but due to her constant escapes, the whole neighbourhood is turned into the Shuffling Dead, with hilarious and bloody consequences. The plot is a fairly simple one, with each of the three acts escalating the absurd gore and violence, until the finale, which is just the most gonzo, blood-fueled madness you will ever see. Only Society rivals it, in my opinion. Let me know in the comments if you know anything more out there than those two films. The opening act sets up our three main characters and the zombie outbreak. Lionel Cosgrove, played brilliantly by Timothy Balme, a downtrodden and fairly pathetic middle-aged man who still lives at home with his overbearing mother, is our main protagonist, a character who slowly morphs over the course of the film from sad, pathetic, clumsy loser to a badass armed with a lawnmower. Even though he does start out kind of pathetic, there is an undeniable sweetness to his character that makes him endearing from the very start. Elizabeth Moody is, in my opinion, the star of the show as the aforementioned overbearing mother, being that perfect blend of unhinged but highly respectable middle-aged woman, the hyacinth bouquet of splatter films, if you will. Then she turns into a grotesque, pus-filled corpse that just refuses to die. In fact, her form also evolves with each act of the film getting ever more fantastical and gross, culminating in her becoming a vast homunculus by the end of the film, with the main cast being rounded out by Paquita, who is actress Diana Penalva, the checkout girl and romantic interest for Lionel, who seemingly throughout the first two-thirds of the film has a magical ability to walk into a room directly after the madness has just occurred, an ability she very much loses in the madcap final act, however. The second act sees Lionel try to solve the zombie mom problem, but that goes horribly wrong, and it escalates to the point a priest has to kick ass for the Lord. The third act is an absolutely blood-soaked series of horror comedy set pieces that culminate in a giant-titted Mommy Dearest trying to unbirth her son. There's a sentence I never thought I'd type. But you aren't here for the plot or the characters. No, what made this movie such a huge critical success, and somewhat commercial success, with it apparently outgrossing Batman Returns per cinema screen in New Zealand on release, is the dark and twisted humour, largely driven by the incredibly graphic violence. This film is fueled by its humour, which is in turn fueled by graphic violence so over the top it becomes hilarious. You can see this from the very opening scene set on Skull Island. Jackson's nod to King Kong, something he's a massive fan of and a property he would later revisit with his own big-budget adaptation in 2005, a film I've tried watching 3 times and never finished. Yeah, his career after The Frighteners really is anathema to me for some strange reason. Once bumped into him in my hometown, actually a really nice guy, so apologies Peter for not enjoying anything you've made since 1996. In that first scene, we see a smuggler trying to smuggle a Sumatran rat monkey back to New Zealand. If you've ever even tried getting a banana past math, you know how entirely ludicrous and hilarious this entire concept is. He also ends up getting bitten by it, leading to his native guide chopping his hand off, then noticing another bite on his other arm, so chopping that off too, before noticing a scratch on his face, and yeah, you guessed it, chopping his head off. This sets the tone for the film's humour throughout. It's basically a series of ever-increasingly ridiculous situations that get more over-the-top, gory and blood-fueled, and as a result, pass straight through horrific to hilarious. To such an extent, the British Film Board allegedly considered giving the film a 15 rating rather than an 18, as they thought the violence was so over-the-top nobody in their right mind would take it seriously. It's that kind of humour. It's also mildly subversive in parts, with two zombies fucking and one of them giving birth to a zombie baby, and they aren't just any two zombies, they are the Catholic priest and a nurse. The baby is another high point of this film, having an extended park scene that highlights the use of physical comedy, being the best scene the baby is in, although it is pretty obvious the baby is a small man in a baby suit at times. Most movies don't have the balls to have a zombie baby, but this one makes it a central character for most of the last third of the film, even going as far as to have the baby pilot an adult zombie from the inside before bursting out of it. Which brings me to the other standout feature of this film, its gore and special effects. This has to be one of the most gory films to exist. As I previously said, the violence is so over the top it enters parody, but that doesn't make it any less impressive or entertaining. I don't know how much I can actually get away with showing on YouTube without getting myself into trouble again, but the pièce de résistance of this movie is when a man gets his face pulled off to reveal the musculature underneath. I genuinely rewound to watch it twice. It's shocking, it's hilarious, and it looks brilliant. I haven't even mentioned the lawnmower grand finale, where Lionel chews his way through the horde of zombies, a scene that used 300 litres of fake blood. A potential world record. I don't know if this movie originated the anything is a weapon trope that has become so popular in zombie movies, but I know for a fact that it is the one that inspired it in films such as Shaun of the Dead. These are just a small sampling of what this film has to offer in terms of inventive and gory deaths. There's a whole bunch of them all brought to the screen by a host of special effects, crafted by Rob McCarran and Richard Taylor. These being another highlight of this film if, like me, you are a lover of practical effects. Running the gamut from stop motion with the Sumatran rat monkey to miniatures for parts of 50s Wellington and everything in between, with most of them having aged really well, and you can actually see a lot of the techniques that Jackson would later use to bring Middle-earth to life here, used for an entirely different, more gory purpose. All of the above makes this film such a wildly entertaining 104 minutes, especially in that final balls-to-the-wall act where literally anything could and does happen. That being said though, this film does have a few small issues, the first of which is the pacing. It's a little bit uneven, the first act especially has quite a few points where I was tempted to check my phone because not much was happening on screen. As this isn't a film I watch for the plot and characters, it doesn't really hit its stride until the middle of the second act and then just escalates to such an absurd level. By the end, as I said earlier, you'll be rewinding bits just to see if what you just saw actually did happen. There's also a bit of a tonal dissonance going on as this film combines absurd levels of graphical violence, played for humour, with a saccharine sweet romance. So one minute you might be seeing someone getting their head ripped off, and the next a sweet and tender moment between our two young lovers, and I think some people might find that a little bit odd. All in all though, Dead Alive aka Braindead is my favourite Peter Jackson film because it's his most entertaining one for me. It is basically everything I love about low budget movies done to such an absurdly brilliant level, and I think this might even be the greatest horror comedy of all time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that, then please like, comment and subscribe.